Hey everyone, welcome back to an Insomniac's Insight. This is my fourth episode. Today we'll be talking about a topic that was requested to me, which is Ouija boards. So I was asked the other day, what are my thoughts on Ouija boards? Do I have any personal experiences with them? And if I don't or do, what were they and would I like to experience them in the future? Well, to start right away, I haven't actually had any personal experiences with Ouija boards. I've met a good amount of people who have, who've actually said that they've used them or have family members that they were with that used them and had, some pretty interesting experiences, which I always thought was pretty cool. The board itself, I didn't know much about it as in reference to like its history. Of course, I know more or less what it does or what it's used for, and typically what kind of experiences people have while using the board. So it's not like I'm unfamiliar with the board itself. Me personally, I've never jumped to using it. I guess the whole reason isn't more of, being afraid or anything like that. It's just, one, I never had one, and two, because of what it's used for and how we know so little, I guess, about how it actually works. If you're one of the people who considers it to be one of the things that really does work, it's just the unknowing characteristic of the board as to what really makes it work, how it really operates, and what really comes out of it, and how to be completely cautious with the board. It's so tricky to understand something that not everybody can comprehend, even though the people who are probably the most educated about the board, there's still probably questions that they don't have answered. That's like with a lot of things that we have in the world. There's a lot of things that we don't fully understand and we will never fully understand, and that's fine. But I just never wanted to try and mess with something that can bring something so aggressive and so violent. Things that we wouldn't be able to do anything about once it's here. I know it does have the tendency where people have good encounters with the Ouija board, where they get to talk to loved ones and family members, or, they have good interactions with certain spirits. And that's nice and all, but, just like I said, there's always the good that comes with the bad. So there's always a possibility that something could go wrong. But I guess that doesn't mean that I would never want to try it. I would, but I'd want to do it, I guess, in a matter where I've learned a bit more about it, just so I can feel a bit more comfortable when using it, since I have such a minimal amount of knowledge that just what I've heard from other people who, that I know. So they might not be the most reliable people, per se. So I guess maybe doing some more looking into it probably give me a better feel for what I'm getting myself into, I guess is what I mean. But besides that, going on, I guess the main thing about it is, what do I think about it? I think that it is a very intriguing tool, to say the least. I started looking around into its history, more or less, just to see where it kind of came from, what made it so big, and why people think it's such a big deal. And furthermore, what does the name actually mean? I feel like a lot of people don't even know what the name Ouija means or where it kind of came from. So me, honestly, I was one of those people, I didn't know what it meant. I've always just taken it as the name that it was given. Sometimes people just come up with random words for random items and it just sticks and nobody questions it. So I kind of feel like that might be the case with this particular item. But apparently one of the more common misconceptions is that Ouija is a combination of the French word oui and the German word ja, which was apparently disproven by a researcher that I had looked up, who is an expert in Ouija board knowledge, which I didn't even know was a thing. So that was pretty interesting to find about. But then again, there's like something for everything. So I was bound to find out that there was a Ouija board specialist, which I think is pretty cool, because then it has somewhere for us to go to look forward to finding answers. You want to have somebody who's knowledgeable about the topic. But anyway, his name is Robert Murch. And he's the one that I found who had the most information in reference to the Ouija board. One of the more interesting facts that I found right away was that, of course, the most common misconception is the combination of the two words to make the word Ouija. But apparently what he found out is that supposedly the, I guess, tall tale or legend behind the board is that the first makers of the board asked the board what they should call it since they could not think of a name. And the name came out spelling Ouija. And the people didn't understand what the board meant. They gave it a few minutes trying to figure out what the board meant by Ouija, if it was trying to convey another word or if it meant it in another language, but the people there did not know or did not understand. And then they decided to ask the board what it means. And as the board decided to spell out what it means, it spelled out good luck. So apparently that is the whole, I guess you could say, history of where the name came from, which something that I would have never even guessed or would have never been able to figure out on my own, let alone even had an idea of that's where it came from. So apparently the board's name came from the board itself, which is really, really cool once you think about it, that if that's where it came from. I would have loved to have been able to see that happen. Seeing something so inanimate give itself its own name. Anyways, so diving deeper into the history, I guess, the research of the board, I guess, goes back to around what I was able to find as far back as around the early, I say 1840s and 50s, if I'm not mistaken. So around that time is where showings and ads for the board decided to pop up around, excuse me, around the, I guess that was actually here in America where it decided to start popping up. It was in a couple of different types of advertisements, I think the first, I wouldn't say paper copy, my bad, like advertisements started popping up around the late, they said anywhere from the late 1860s to around 1870s, where it started popping up in newspaper ads for both Pittsburgh and in New York. I believe in Pittsburgh it was described as Ouija, the wonderful talking board. It started popping up in toy shops and novelty shops, so it's actually been inside toy shops ever since it was in mass production, which is something that I didn't know either. I know a lot of people decided to, once they noticed that it can be sold at like Walmart and Target and Amazon and whatnot, and described as a family friendly game, people decided to kind of poke fun at that, saying that how is this anywhere near family friendly, because of the fact that we give it a certain meaning towards the Ouija board now, but back then it was actually described as a very family oriented game that you could use at home. So apparently it was also described in an advertisement as interesting and mysterious, testified as proven patent office. It was allowed back in 1890 when this paper came out, and it was being sold for $1.50. So that's pretty cool. They gave the basic design that we have now. It's always almost been the same, just a flat board with the alphabet arrayed throughout it, 2 semicircles and a couple of numbers from 0 through 9, the words yes and no, and then in the uppermost corner it would say those yes and no's. At the very bottom you would have goodbye, and then the classic planchette and the teardrop shape that we're all accustomed to now. Furthermore, it was usually either cardboard, plastic, paper, or wood, I guess depending on how much you're willing to pay for the board itself. So apparently when it got its patent, back in the 1850s, it was actually the reason why it got its patent was because it was proven to have work in the patent office, and it had to be proven to work before they were allowed to patent it, which was pretty interesting, that you have to prove a spirit board to work to a patent office in order to get your work patent. I know that's pretty much how patents work, but it's just kind of something so bizarre when you think about it, that it's a spirit board and you have to patent a spirit board, and hope that the spirits are going to respond when you ask them to respond. So one of the other things that I found while researching Robert Murch's work is that one of the main things he cannot find, and that I couldn't find, I find all these random explanations as to where it really comes from and how it really works. Nobody can seem to actually find a definitive answer. We all have our own beliefs as into it's a subconscious thing and somebody's always moving it when they have their hand on it. You have the people who just do it for the hell of it and they move it just to be funny. Or that it actually is a spirit, or that it has something to do with magnets. There's always those different types of meanings that people try to give an explanation to the unexplained. But actually, if you go back as far as where the board is, I guess originated from around the 1850s and so on, there's no definitive answer even in the patent papers where it describes how it's actually supposed to work, other than by a quote-unquote unknown phenomena of the mind. So that's pretty odd that there's not even a, I guess, vague description of how it's supposed to work. So I thought there would be some kind of explanation other than, what we're accustomed to, but that's not the case. What we are familiar with today is what they had originated back when the board became big and started hitting the shelves. So that's pretty bizarre. I thought there'd be some kind of history to that, and there wasn't. So moving forward, the Ouija board itself was kind of a tool that was always described as fun because you'd be able to communicate with spirits. I don't know how that would seem as fun or family entertainment, because you're contacting stuff that is not common and kind of dangerous. But I mean, I guess if you think that's fun, which I guess a lot of people do now, though, so I guess that's not inaccurate. Anyway, so one of the more major things that people kind of saw in the board is that it was something new, and I guess it was also around the time period. Lifespans weren't as big as ours. There was a lot less medical advances and stuff like that, so there was mothers dying from childbirth, children dying at young ages, and then of course normal people, their normative ages, their lifespans weren't as long as what we're accustomed to today. So there was a certain desire for people to connect with people they had lost, and they say that's kind of one of the big things that led to the Ouija board becoming so successful when it did, because you're promoting the fact that you could communicate with not only other spirits, but spirits of people that you possibly lost. And around that time period, with everything that was going on, it was something that was really, really interesting to people, to be able to get their hands on something that allows them to talk to people that they miss, people that they want to converse with, people that they want to know are okay. And then also it's just out of general curiosity, it's just something that I guess people have always been interested into, about the other side. I know that's something that I'm obviously interested into, like what happens once you die, where do you go, what's there, what's left, what can progress, or is there anything at all, and if so, how do you know that it exists? How can you affirmatively say that this is what it's meant to be, once it goes through that process, So I guess that's always been the big thing about it. Ouija boards is just that it kind of gives people, I guess, not answers, because I feel like with a Ouija board you get left with more questions than you do answers, and you're never really sure if the answers you're getting are from who or what you feel like you're getting them from, and if they're actually the answers that you wanted to begin with. Because I guess just using it at all is giving you an answer to a big question, as into, is there anything after? That's kind of one big question that you are having answered. If you feel like the board is actually something that works for you, you're getting a direct answer just by having the board respond to you. Now, any questions you may ask after that is something that, is completely subjective, and therefore, you may have it answered, you may not. But then again, because of your having that question answered of, there is something after death, now you have more questions to ask because of that. If there is, then how does this piece of plastic and a planchette, this little teardrop shaped item, allow me to communicate with something that is far beyond our mind's limitations? Every other method that we could possibly conceive to try to communicate with spirits and people who have passed on have no kind of working stand when it comes to that. There's no way for them to communicate with them. You can't talk to them through a phone. You can't do anything with the technology that we have now, but somehow a board that is just almost the same materials as materials that you use every day has the means to do so. I find that highly intriguing. I don't know if it's like people say, it's just a more like a placebo effect kind of thing, where people feel like it works and it's more like a subconscious thing. But you hear about all these experiences with people having asked severely personal questions that when they're with friends or relatives or whatever, and it's personal questions that nobody would be able to answer other than themselves, and the only way that those could be answered would be through a subconscious type of means, where they're answering the question themselves and they don't even know it. And that's pretty interesting. But at the same time, I feel like if it's a person who has that deep personal question and it's hidden away for a reason, then there would be no way that they would disclose that answer themselves, subconsciously or consciously. That's something that's kind of odd to me, and that's always kind of made me wonder as to how else could the answer be getting out there other than A, the person is disclosing that answer themselves, or B, somehow, some way, it is something from a different side that is able to answer it because they know a lot more than what you think they know. And that's pretty I guess you could say pretty heavy to think about, because once you are on that other side, it kind of, if that's the case, that they're able to know things that they didn't know beforehand, then does it kind of mean that when you're on that other side, your mind, your everything is just open to anything? You become literally eternal, and you can know and understand everything. And that's how they get these answers. That would be an explanation that I guess maybe some people haven't considered when it comes to how these spirits or whatever may get these answers. But what if it's because once you move on, you become part of everything? And I guess that is the more common theme of death. You die, your body is decayed and is returned to the earth, and then your spirit is left as energy. Well, everything in itself has some kind of energy, so therefore you do become part of everything, if that's, in the same manner of quote-unquote energy. Now, I guess that's more or less along the lines of what you believe personally, as to what happens when you die. But like I said, where else would people get the answers from other than, of course, there's those people who love to play tricks and the quote-unquote psychics and palm readers and all that kinds of things, people who are just out there to get your money and, give you the answers that you want to hear whenever it's actually not true. But I mean, what about your own personal experience? I'm pretty sure some of you have used it or know somebody who's used it, and you've had your own experience. You've had your own stories told to you where, it could be you're sitting there either alone or with one other person that you trust, and you guys think it's a big joke, and you start messing with it, and then things just get a little too personal. you start getting questions to answers that you didn't think they'd be able to answer. You start hearing things, you start feeling the chills, you get goosebumps, you get worried, you get paranoid, it gets cold, you know, you feel things that you didn't want to feel, emotions that you didn't think you'd feel by just testing this little board out. And you let it just be all fun and games, and it turns into something a lot more serious than you expected, you know? So I guess that's something that you kind of have to take with a grain of salt and understand that it probably is a different experience for everybody, even though in some ways it is similar. For the most part, I mean, you know, depending on what kind of experience you had, I'm pretty sure there's somebody else who's had a similar experience, was what I'm trying to say. But that, do your experiences define the way you think about the board and how you feel about the board now? Or is it simply based upon what you've heard, you know, either whether it be through people like me who say it through podcasts or YouTube videos, or, you know, by word of mouth from, say, a family friend, coworker, or whatever. You know, I mean, you can hear those stories from almost anybody if you look in the right places, I guess. So, you know, I kind of wonder what makes people think about the board the way they does. I know some people see it as a bad thing. You know, they give it a negative connotation that it's going to bring demons, it's going to bring the devil, it's going to bring all kinds of poltergeist activity into my home. But then there's other people who just believe that it's a fun game. You know, you can mess with different types of spirits, have conversations with them, play games with them, ask them questions, ask them dumb questions. And, you know, they'll be apt to play along. You know, there's people who've had experiences like that, and that's pretty nice if that's actually what's going on. And then, like, you know, you have the people who have the great experiences where, you know, they claim to talk to their loved ones, you know, a grandfather or grandmother, a brother or sister, a mom, dad, you know, a lost child, things of that nature, where they get some kind of closure, they get some kind of reconciliation, and it just brings a lot more joy into their life. You know, they get to feel that sense of everything's okay and I know they're okay, or the fact that they have some confirmation that there's a chance that now that they know where they are, or that they know that they're okay, then they will be able to see them again one day, and that gives them a sense of hope and a sense of reason to progress on, you know, to move forward with every day and see that there is something that they're moving towards, to seeing that, you know, specific person or whatever the case may be again. So I guess there's a lot of different ways for you to hear and for you to experience the board itself, and therefore it gives you a different type of outlook, or a different type of outlook or perception on the board itself and what it is meant for and what it does. Like me, I said, personally, I don't see it as a bad thing, and I don't necessarily see it as a good thing. I kind of see it as a thing that can go either way, but you just have to know how to work with it. You know, it's kind of one of those things that anything could be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just the way you learn about it, the way you understand it, and the way you know how it works, the better you'll be able to use it and, you know, make it benefit you more. I know, I guess saying a Ouija board itself is not beneficial, depending on how you look at it, but in the way that things will transpire from the acts that you know, the questions you ask and the actions that happen as a result of what you ask, then you will be more likely to have a positive experience, hopefully. That's kind of what I guess my outlook is on it, that when I use it, hopefully by the time that I have learned as much as I want to learn about it, that I will be able to have an enjoyable experience, and that it'll be something that I can hopefully recount to you guys, you know, not have anything bad happen to me. That's what I hope for, and that maybe I'll end up talking to, you know, somebody that I've lost, or depending on who I do the Ouija board session with, somebody that they've lost, and there's a sense of I guess not happiness, because I feel like also talking to somebody that you lost may bring back memories and bring back feelings that, you know, maybe aren't the best, or maybe are just something that you never thought you'd experience again, because you have kind of, I guess had their memory as a memory in the back of your mind. You know that they passed away, you know that they were here, but you don't have to be sad about the fact that they're gone, because there's no constant reminder. But a reminder like that, something actually you believe that you're hearing from them, directly from them, it's kind of heartwarming, but then also a bit troublesome, because then you're happy because you know that they're okay, that they're able to respond to you, and that they're hopefully happy. But then at the same time, you can only talk to them through this. And if there's somebody who was close to you, this is something that's probably going to be difficult, because it's possibly that it could just be a one-time thing. And that'll just make you, of course, remember, miss them, and you'll move on. But I guess it just depends on how the experience goes, what happens, things of that nature. But other than that, I always wanted to know how the Ouija board came about, and I'm kind of not upset, but more curious to see if I do more research, further than just what Robert Murch had provided and what I was able to find on, different types of sites, that maybe I may be able to find a little bit more about it. I found so much in relation to people's experiences, people being possessed, taken over by demons, and haunted and followed, throughout their homes. There's, of course, the belief that a lot of famous exorcisms happen because of Ouija boards, or, stuff like that. So I feel like there is a good amount of history to it, but I feel like the history that I found, was not really what I was looking for. I wanted to know, who came up with the idea for a Ouija board, and why is the board set up the way that it is. It's just letters and numbers, and then a yes or no and goodbye. How does the planchette play into it, other than the fact that it's just something that you're utilizing for the spirit to guide your hands through in order to see the answers that it'll give you? But how does that play into the board itself? Why or how is the spirit able to, I guess, connect itself to not connect itself to the board, but use the board itself as a means of being able to communicate with people on this other side? And if so, how did they discover that this board would work in the first place? A lot of that could have been answered through, trial and error, and the board, the way it does, just could be for aesthetic purposes. People just like the way things look, and so they'll give it that definitive type of look. But then that also made me wonder. I know that there's people who use homemade versions of Ouija boards, on pieces of paper and a homemade planchette out of, I don't know, plastic paper or whatever. And how did those have the same effect as a normal Ouija board that is, mass produced? And also, on top of that, how are the Ouija boards that we have today similar to the ones that were probably back then more or less made by hand? How do they have the same effects as the ones that were introduced early on? Is it just the board itself, like the meaning that the board has? Is it something within the structure? I know not everything will have a definitive answer, and obviously now there is no definitive answer as to how it works. But I feel like hopefully one day those types of questions will be answered, because it's so interesting to know how something operates. I feel like that's a big thing for me. I want to understand how things work, especially things that are kind of vague in explanations. So Ouija board is very, very interesting in the way that it's literally a piece of cardboard, a piece of plastic, a piece of paper, and then another smaller piece of paper in a teardrop shape that allows you to be able to do this grand scheme of communicating with the dead or with spirits as a whole that you cannot do with anything else in the world. I wouldn't say anything, but almost anything else that you can think of any day. You can't just pick up your phone and call a dead relative, or you can't just use your email to, or a text message or whatever, to communicate with spirits or with the dead. And that's kind of bizarre that something so simple can do something so foreign to us, something that we would have never thought we'd be able to do, is what I mean. So, like I said, I wonder if any of you guys have used it. I'm pretty sure some of you had to have used it at one time or considered it. So I'd like to hear about that if you guys have. Speaking of that, the way you guys can contact me now. I'm sorry about this. I actually just recently had an Instagram page made for the podcast. So it's the same thing as the title of the podcast, an Insomniac's Insight. You guys are more than welcome to go to the Instagram page, follow me, and I have a couple different posts up already, just kind of briefly describing the episodes that have already been up, and, just directing people to the SoundCloud page itself. So it would really help a lot if you guys, just go over there and, you guys can check it out. And if you guys would want to, you could leave a comment on any picture you find there. You can message me, tell me what you guys think about the episodes themselves. If you'd like to hear more history-oriented stuff, if you'd like to hear more personal thoughts, I kind of, like I said, I don't really have a structure yet, so I'm kind of just modifying things as I go along as to what I see fits every episode, or more or less just how I feel about talking about the topic, with every episode. Like some topics I'm not as knowledgeable as others, like for the Ouija board, I had to do a little bit more research as into the history aspect of it, since I don't really have any personal experiences, but I just have more of my personal feelings and thoughts towards the board itself. So, I'd have to, adjust the way I talk about every topic. Like the last episode with the aliens and life itself, that was just more a rambling type of topic, where I could just talk about my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own opinions as to what that kind of thing is. And then, of course, with the alien side, just kind of my own perspective on what it is. So I kind of feel like, since no episode has a set structure yet, if you guys would kind of just tell me what you guys like or don't like, I'd really appreciate it, so I can kind of, modify it here and there, kind of just do it how I also see fit. But with your guys' suggestions, I can kind of mix and match, or kind of merge it together to try to make something that flows a bit better and doesn't sound so choppy. I kind of just talk with you guys, and that's more or less what I feel comfortable with. But I know some people like the whole scripted type thing. It's just not something that I'm able to do because of time constraints. So I just love talking to you guys, letting you guys hear what I have to say, my thoughts, and kind of what comes to my mind as I'm going along. I'll do a little research here and there depending on the topic, just so I can have a good hold on what I want to talk about, if I'm not really knowledgeable. So it kind of gives me a little bit of ground to work with. But more or less, the whole episode itself is kind of me just talking with you guys, because it's what I love to do. I love to just let you guys hear what I have to say. But anyways, this episode has just been, I guess, not short, but shorter than the last few episodes. Like I said, it's probably just because of the fact that, I don't have any personal experiences to convey to you guys. So I'm sorry about that. But if you guys would like me to, I would be more than happy to talk to the people that I have. Like I said, I've met some people who've had experiences with Ouija boards, and I can relay those to you guys if you'd like. Just kind of how I said also in one of my previous episodes, which was my second episode, where I talked a little bit about my personal experiences, where I work and where I go to school, paranormal wise. If you guys would want to hear, kind of the rest of those mixed up together, as into what I've experienced as well outside of there, like at home, or I've experienced stuff away from home, and not necessarily just ghost activity, but unexplained paranormal activity in general. So if you guys would want to hear about any of that, just let me know. I've had experiences ranging from, gosh, it's hard to describe them all. I've had paranormal experiences, ghosts, voices, whispers, certain types of sounds, everywhere. I've had it from my home, my grandparents' home, when I go out of town, inside hotels, at a hospital even. I've had it happen because I actually go out of town to go hunting. I've had it happen when I'm out there alone in the cabin. And not only had stuff that are related to ghosts, but also other unexplained events, and I've been with people who've had other type of events happen. So I'd be more than happy to share that with you guys if you'd want to hear that out. As well, if there's any type of topic, related to supernatural type things that you'd want to hear. I remember talking to someone the other day and they suggested things like, Wendigos or skinwalkers or stuff of that nature and my thoughts on them, or if I've had any experiences with them. I'd love to share those with you as well. So like I said, you can either leave a like and leave a comment anywhere on the podcast if you'd want, or you guys can head over to the Instagram page and comment on any picture, or you can send me a message and I'll be more than happy to try and reply to you if I get the chance, or take your topic into consideration, see what I can do and what I can work with it. But that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate the support every single day that you guys are able to give me support. It means the world to me that somebody is out there listening. So hopefully you guys have a wonderful day and have a wonderful rest of your week if I'm not able to upload by the end of the week. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.